Good morning, good morning, good morning. Morning. Right, welcome everyone. I know numbers down at committees at the moment, seem to be down everywhere, down to COVID, but we're all here, got a quorum, it's wonderful. First item, declaration of interests, are there any? No, okay. Item 2, apologies for absence, substitutes.
Yes, we have apologies for absence from Councillors Hartley, Holland, Nurden and Prutton, and we have Councillor Beadle as a substitute for Councillor Holland.
Yes. And thank you, Stuart, as well, late notice. David Harrison is very, very poor, as you know, Emma.
Yeah.
So he couldn't substitute for us, and everybody else on the Dem side is at work on short notice, so they couldn't attend, just as it is at the moment. Minutes of, sorry, sir. Oh, did you have those?
No, we
I haven't received.
Right, yeah, well spotted, yeah. Apologies from Karen, she's off with a hip replacement. Gone down again. Item 3 minutes of overview and scrutiny committee meeting on 29th of March, page 7. Ken, for accuracy, everyone happy? Yeah. Agreed. Any matters arising? None. Okay. Chairman's announcements? None. Public speaking? None. Okay, so we move directly on to cabinet reports. Item 7, cabinet reports. Agenda item 9, page 18. Ken, page 18. And Debbie, unfortunately, has gone down with COVID, affecting such a lot of people these days. So Emma's going to present for us. So over to you, Emma, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do a general overview, and then we've got assistant directors at the other end of the table for any detailed questions that you may have on the report. So this report brings to you the proposed initiatives relating to the earmark reserves that were created as the result of the in-year budget options. If you recall, we had this through on a paper a few months ago. So the report sets out for you the further details on those initiatives, which are progress towards carbon net zero, accelerating our growth agenda, our environment, supporting our communities, and investing in our talent and pipeline for the one team. So some of these initiatives are already reflected in the current delivery plan, and where these additional initiatives are proposed, they will be added into the delivery plan in due course, subject to agreement. So we're on page 20 for you, Ken. At the top of the page there sets out the financial values for each of those areas, totaling 2.578 million. Through section 3 of the report provides your earmarked reserves for each of those areas. So if I take you through one as an example, earmarked reserve 1 is your progress towards a carbon net zero, and there's 0.685 million, and in there for each of those you have a description of the initiative, whether they're subject to a business case, the estimated BDC cost, and then where it reflects through to the delivery plan that has already been approved. That's in place for all of those earmarked reserves through pages 20, 21 and 22. Section 4 of the report sets out the movement in reserve that's required to fund those, and that's set out for you in the table at 4.1. Finally, the report sets out for you the authority to use the reserves. Obviously, once the reserves are in a reserve, we need the ability to get those back out again, subject to the business case. And the table at the top of page 23 sets out those delegations. So again, taking the carbon net zero as an example, the authorisation to use those will be with the Assistant Director for Economic Growth in consultation with the portfolio holder for environmental excellence. And that's carried on through that table there for you, Chairman. And finally, Appendix B of the reports does slot in that delivery plan addendum, which makes the changes to the delivery plan should this paper be approved in due course. As I said, we've now got 4. We've got another one snuck in, assistant directors at the end of the table. So we've got Mike, Simon, George and Corinne, who are able to take any detailed questions should you have them, Chair, on the paper.
Thanks, Emma. Right. So, who's in first?
Well, somebody's got to kick off, don't they, Chair?
Thank you. Stuart.
Yeah, on page 20, Chair.
Yeah.
If I can get to page 20. 3 new posts. It's 180,000 £180,000 for all 3 posts. Now, presumably this includes on costs. And I presume that the on costs are calculated on an average basis, so that the average of all the on costs per officer is just allocated onto the salary costs here.
So the So the on costs are for each post. So we work on circa about 27% on costs, and they're added onto each post. There's always one, Peter. Oh, it's Ken.
Ken.
Sorry, Ken, come on.
Yeah, they're like,
Well, it's not me because I left mine in the van. So there you go. So if I come back on that, Chair,
yes.
at 27%, that's an average across the board. Now, presumably, there'll be no actual increase in capital costs supporting those officers. So there should be somewhere a marginal saving on that budget, because the on costs are in excess of what the actual marginal cost will be.
You, Emma, or anyone else?
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at, Councillor Beadle.
Well, it's quite simply put. If you use an average of, in this case, 27% for on costs, the actual increase in the actual costs will be less than the 27%, because things like buildings and heating and electricity and all the other things won't go up at the same rate, and therefore there'll be a marginal saving on the on costs, and therefore there should be a budget saving expressed somewhere else in the budget.
Thank you for the clarity. So on costs don't cover things like that, Councillor Beadle. On costs are purely pension contributions, employer, NI, that kind of thing. So it's your grossed salary. So it's the complete cost of that salary to the authority, which is where the 27% comes from. Because you've got your pension contributions, which is 15%, and then you've got your additional NI, etc. on top of that.
So employee overheads.
Yeah.
Which I think's a little bit of confusion around on costs and overheads. Right, okay.
It's not like in a business where you're.
Are you coming in?
Apologies.
There's a pop, you think?
Apologies. It's not like in a business where you're doing overhead recovery or anything else like that for, as you say, for rent rates like heat and power. So it's just the overhead on the payroll costs.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, a general overview question on this. Part of the report refers to. I'm sorry, but this is going on a little bit too long today. A little bit of natter here and there doesn't matter, but it's just constant at the moment, and I think it's just to avert anybody's attention. So, thank you. Yeah. So within the report, there's reference to certain aspects of it, which is still yet to be flushed out with a business case. Could you just explain why a business case isn't already here for them? It's an overview scrutiny, straight question. Probably know what the answer is, but it should be asked. Thank you.
So a business case for the post particularly, is that the question?
Yeah.
So the report's actually slightly incorrect. So my intention is not to bring a business case for these new posts.
Okay.
What we're asking for here is additional resource to deliver the already ambitious capital and revenue programme that the council has. So there was a slight error in the report in that it should not be subject to a business case, is my proposal.
So the reasoning and need for this has already been clearly identified, costed through and worked through.
And just to add to that, on some of them where you will see the business case, obviously they will, as you know, come back through the decision-making process where those business cases are warranted. In the example that George has given, then absolutely the need for that resource is already being proven, as you say, Chairman, through the capital programmes that are being pushed through. So that's why you've got a mixture of business cases needed and not needed.
Okay, dokie. So, George, could we just make reference to this in the report for the Cabinet, that we are clear, the business case does not have to be made for them. So it's just a one we picked up. And on the others where a business case does need to be made, what's the sort of time frame around those? MOU's referring to as well.
They are differing depending on the topic. So each assistant director could give you their timelines, but they are different depending on the work. So if you've got specific ones, then we can get those through. What we're really cognizant of is all of this is for delivery in the next 2-year delivery plan. So the time frame obviously needs to match that. And we are keen to spend this gift of money that we have as quickly as possible so that we can start really seeing some outcomes as a result of this paper. So as soon as those business cases are ready, I'm sure assistant directors will bring those in for you.
Okay, and one final one for me. If on any one of these, the business case fails to be proved at some point, not the previous one we discussed around the employment of the officers, what would then happen to those funds? Supposing in 9 months' time, hypothetically, business case on item X failed, what would happen to those funds?
So as you know, the money goes into the earmarked reserves, and we can only draw that down out of the earmarked reserve subject to a business case where one is needed. If the business case then fails, then obviously that money stays in reserves. And when Cabinet look at those reserves, they would look to reprofile that should they feel it necessary, or ask officers to pull together a subsequent business case in the same area, go away and do further work, etc., etc. But that money stays in the reserves until a decision is made to draw it down from the business case, or as I say, to move it elsewhere into other areas of the business.
Or to declare it as a surplus in
Or
general
a surplus that's not needed.
next year?
Yeah.
Okay. I know in the past, occasionally, of my time here, we've had a similar situation, Emma, when that it's been declared as a surplus for the following year. Okie dokie. Right, so I think all the critical points from me anyway on this business case, what happens on the finance, etc. I'm happy with. Anyone else? Sue?
Thank you, Chair. I was pleased to see that the environment and communities were prioritised more after reading this report. Under supporting our communities on page 28, there's a list of the things that we were going to focus on as a council to help people in hardship. And I was a little bit concerned that there was no mention of access to the internet and the necessary hardware, because obviously if you're in a difficult situation, if you're trying to look for work, having access to the internet to claim universal credit seems to be imperative now. So I just wondered whether we could add some kind of communications assistance for people to that list on page 28. Thanks.
Deal with Mike. Yes.
Yep, thank you, Chairman. And in part of our thinking, access to internet is absolutely very much in our thinking. So I'll make sure that's particularly in there, because we know that through hardship, not just access to employment, but we know that you're more likely to get a worse deal for electricity and utilities if you don't go online. So yeah, we need to factor that in. And the only way that we're really going to resolve this issue is by giving people access to either improve their income or reduce their expenses. And they can reduce their expenses by having good quality internet access. So certainly we're looking at that, but I'll make sure that's featured in.
So, Mark, just a follow-through question, some funding on this. So you say, appreciate the response there, Mike, by the way. So in between now and the cabinet, you're not going to be able to work up a plan for that, are you?
We're working actually on working up tomorrow. We'll be going to talking to our policy committees, the wellbeing panel, on the, now I've forgotten the date, but it's a couple of weeks' time. Councillor Morrell is about to tell me. So we'll have a fairly good indication where we're going to be by cabinet, and I'll be able to share that information. But it is quite a live agenda at the moment, so I'm hoping we will certainly have more information about where we're going. Whether or not we'll have the full picture, I'm not sure by cabinet.
Okay, so I'm just for clarity here. So the point that Sue's raised, which I think is an obvious one, you've on it. Are you saying it's now your intention, subject from this discussion we've had today, to work up some kind of additional header to cover that issue about the internet to go to cabinet?
Well, that was in. But I can make it clear that was in our thinking anyway. But yeah, we will make sure that I will specifically mention internet when that goes to the cabinet.
So if it was in your thinking, can I now press you on this? What was in your thinking in terms of how we can assist people?
Yep, certainly, Chairman. I mean, so and again, my initial ideas, and we'll be talking to members about this. So, looking at the three work strands really: crisis minimisation, so immediate support. So people who are absolutely in the muddle now, what can we do? Particularly with looking at just basic food and funding, and ultimately to prevent a homelessness case, because that's ultimately what costs the council money, but also makes that situation far worse. So, crisis minimisation. We're then looking at prevention. So those people who are not quite in crisis, but they absolutely need support to stop them getting there. That's where, and those will be a mix of debt, welfare, budgeting and advice. Can we do some practical work in terms of, hopefully, Rishi Sunak has authorised some more household support funds. So that's been a really fantastic scheme over the last 6 months. So we'll be looking to capitalise on that when that comes through again. But really ensuring our kind of day-to-day job is enhanced to ensure that family can stay in their own home and they can keep those payments up, or we can make payment reliefs, that type of stuff. Prevention stuff is our help up approach anyway. So what is it that's got you in the muddle, and how can we stop it? I think that what perhaps the most interesting thing and the really important bit that we need to enhance is what we're calling crisis prevention. So the only way that we can deal with this hardship case, because this hardship issue isn't going to go away in the next year. We're looking at household incomes not going back to the same level from 2020 until 2028. So we've got a number of years to work on this. So the only way we can do is to work with households to either improve your income or reduce your outgoings. So increasing in income. So there's been a few successful projects which I'm looking at around the country around older people, and we ensure that they're entitled to benefits. And older people don't tend to claim benefits that they're entitled to. Either they don't know about it, or they're stubborn and unwilling to do that. So we need to find ways to support people to claim the benefits they're paid all their life to do so. For working age is, can we help get you into further employment? Can we increase your hours? And what are the barriers to doing that, whether it's childcare, transport, etc. So that's some of the things we're thinking about: increasing income. Reducing debt is some really basic stuff about the internet. So have you got access to the right systems to ensure that you can you can access deals online? Basic budgeting skills, basic cooking skills, basic skills just around looking at what are your costs and how can you reduce them in the longer term. So there's some stuff that we can do practically which will help individuals, and I'm looking at a targeted database that we've got that we're creating to really hone down on those families who are struggling and those cohorts of people, so we can actually target those families who are either in deprived areas or we know they're struggling because of their family makeup. So we can actually target people. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking at. That's a kind of a bit of a broad one, but we can bring that back.
No, I understand. What the specific question was actually about, the point that Sue's raised, which I support as well. it's all well and good, it's great work. You always do great work, Mike. I know exactly where you are, and I know you're passionate about your job. Completely respect you in that. Always have done. The issue is the same one really that we had during COVID, where I was involved with others, some localities where we got people to donate laptops for kids that didn't have them, because now there's going to be at home, deprived families. Families don't have them either. Mum might have a mobile, possibly, and therefore they're really disadvantaged. And raised a lot of money and a lot of laptops for those kids. However, this is the point, I think, is that this access is the point that we're really talking about. Just pressure on around. Is there a plan about how you could possibly help some of these families in terms of that access to the internet? Because otherwise, as you say, utility bills, it's all failing, isn't it?
So on that specific point, and that's good to bring me down into that, because I'll tend to waffle because I'm passionate about this area. But we're working with the library service. The library service has a specific scheme. Norfolk Libraries has a specific scheme which offers laptops and tablets to families. So can we enhance that? How much capability they've got is the bit that we're working through. If you haven't got data, can we offer mobile data? All that really practical stuff. Where are you? And this is, I'm really interested in the library's approach, because they've done it geographically. Because it's all very well if you're in Taverham, because you've probably got a good signal. If you're out in Horsford, thank you, Councillor Kelly, then you probably haven't got as good a signal. So it's practically, where does that family live and what can we practically do about it? And that's, so we've got an initial scheme with the library service, which is working well. I want to see how far that can go, how far we can push it, or whether we as a council can enhance that scheme for our residents in Broadland.
Brilliant answer, Mike. We got there. Thanks very much. So you happy with that too? Because I think we've really pushed that one.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise another potential difficulty. I've had great trouble trying to get hold of the Norfolk Assistance Scheme at Norfolk County Council. Two fairly serious issues. They're just not answering the phone. And I would like some reassurance, please, that our help hub doesn't leave our residents in that situation. People who are not internet savvy, and that includes an awful lot of people over 80, just cannot deal with issues unless they can speak to somebody on the phone. So could you give me some reassurance that the phone's being answered, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. So we have a team, and one of the benefits of the collaboration is the fact that I've got a more resilient team now between South North and Broadland. So we have a team of 6 staff, our help hub support staff, who are, and they're rotated on the phones 8:15, always at 8:30 here. I can never remember which one. 8:30 till 5 o'clock in Broadland, Monday to Friday. So I can absolutely guarantee and give you that assurance. We also make sure and we have checks back. So if we can't answer the immediate call, then we know that they run back. So I can absolutely give you that assurance. In terms of the Norfolk Assistance Scheme, I'm slightly disappointed with that. So I'm speaking to the manager tomorrow morning actually. So I'll raise that because again, it's that frustration of, and I would much rather have a initial answer say, I'm sorry, I can't help, but someone will ring you back within the day, rather than just not getting hold of it, because that's just not acceptable, because that just increases anxiety.
Okay. Stuart and then Jan.
Also on page 28, you've got a list of 4 priorities there, 4. I noticed that unable to pay rent. Could we actually add in there, pay the mortgage?
Any response?
That's something we're looking at. Obviously, we're then going into a world of heading into the commercial sector. So if there's a reason you can't pay your mortgage, then obviously you've got that asset there that we need to look at. But that is something we're looking about, because what we're seeing is we are seeing more people now coming into hardship who have got their own property, which is unusual, because they tend to be in the private rented sector. So what we're going to do with that mortgage sector is something we have got to look at. So obviously we've got to balance that up with taxpayers' money, but how we do that is something we are actively exploring. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. On that, there used to be a scheme, and I don't know if it's still going or not, whereby if somebody was in financial difficulties in fulfilling their mortgage obligations, then the council or the council through a housing association would take on the property, and therefore they would convert their mortgage into a rent, and the family would not be moved. Does that still operate?
I haven't heard that scheme for a while, but I'll see when that was and when that stopped. But,
Chair,
It's fun.
obviously this sort of if we can actually do that, then it stops the whole uprooting of a family and all their support relationships and everything else, and it's more economic. It's more economic than putting them in emergency accommodation, and quite often the lenders are actually very appreciative as well. So it's I think it's something we should be doing, to be honest. We used to do it. We need to do it again.
Right, so you, Mike, was on the same funnel.
It
thing.
was, yeah, and it is around the mortgage payments, and again, what I think there was a scheme where if you speak to the lender, they will convert it from a capital repayment mortgage into an interest-only mortgage, and therefore you only have the interest for a period of time, and then that could be something where you're looking, as it's not a capital element, it's not helping and assisting into the purchase of the property, but it is repaying it in like a rent type situations. So that element might be something we may be able to look to help and assist with.
thank you, Councillor Marley. And I think with all our thinking, it's all very well going in with an immediate issue and putting a bit of money on the table. But the trouble is that won't resolve the long-term issue. What we need to be doing is, why have you got in? And if that's a scheme that we can help negotiate to reduce its costs, that's absolutely fine. That's what we need to be doing. Or actually having that honest conversation, and we do get this with particularly around older people, who they're in a property which the family have moved out. They don't need 3 bedrooms anymore, but it's the family property. Absolutely understand that. But that honest conversation of perhaps it's time to downsize, and so I think some of those honest conversations have to happen as well.
Right, Ian?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just to say that my experience certainly with the Help Hub has been great. I mean, they've been very helpful, as the name says. So thanks for that. Just on communication, though, just an observation, I guess, is how to communicate with those who aren't on the internet and who haven't got access to even a library. As in many of our rural villages, so we have a mobile library once a week and so on, but not everybody's using that. So it's just how to communicate effectively what's available in terms of support and so on. So we've certainly been looking at parish newsletters and maybe urging parishes to be able to advertise the support that's available through the newsletters, because that gets pushed through the letterbox, through every door in the parish, if you have one. And also the church magazines and so on. Interestingly, we've certainly seen with our local food bank an significant increase this last month, and some of those referrals come through schools. So again, another channel of communication. Sorry, changing the topic now, going to the point. I was a bit late in coming on because for some reason I got it all loaded and then I lost it on the iPad and now it's reloaded. So I've got there. Pages 26, 27 is item 4, temporary increase in development management capacity. There's a big risk, as is noted, that there are no suitable planners available to fill the resource gap. I'm just wondering what contingency might be in place, given that we recognise that risk.
Hello, Phil.
Hi, Chair.
Phil, you got him out my attention there somehow.
Like a ninja, I just appear when I'm
ninjaed
needed.
in.
Yeah. What's the contingency? The contingency is what I describe as suboptimal, but it will be looking at, can we bring in more graduate apprentices, for example? So we're at that time of year where people will be graduating. Can we bring other people in? Can we even explore people that may want a slight career change, but have some understanding of the development industry and the development sector already? As I've always described, though, the real challenge that the team faces, and this is a nationwide problem, is that experienced senior officer. And we face some large, complex matters, complex cases, complex issues like nutrients neutrality, for those that are aware of that issue, that are adding significant complications. So that's why I say it's suboptimal, because we can bring in graduates, but it's those more experienced planners that would ideally like to see here.
So the implications are that there could be quite a significant delay in many of those planning applications on top of the delays we've already experienced. Is that correct? I guess. I mean, it's difficult to quantify, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Look, we're here to seek to avoid those delays, but at the moment we are, and I'm not coming here for sympathy or to, wailing and gnashing of teeth, but we have unprecedented levels of applications, unprecedented levels of growth, unprecedented levels of complexity in that growth, whether it's the strategic scale of somewhere like Rackheath for 4,000 homes, or the added complications of things such as nutrient neutrality, which has just recently been introduced and threatens the entire growth agenda. And at the same time, there is an absolute lack of planners, and those planners, because we're in a boom time, are being attracted to the private sector, because the private sector in a boom time can pay more. So you put all those things together, and the team are doing exceptionally well in exceptionally difficult circumstances, and will do everything they can to avoid delays to the system. But that may be a consequence as we go further down the line. Bear with me, Chair, because I know I'm waffling at this point, but it is worth noting at this point in time, and this is a tangent, but at this point in time, we are not in a position where we can issue any planning permission for any residential accommodation anyway. So we're going to see delays in the grants of planning permission, primarily because of nutrient neutrality anyway.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And it was just to clarify, and also for us to be able to explain that when it comes to planning applications coming to parish councils and so on, and town councils, because those questions are going to be asked, and we need to just understand the situation so we can support you in explaining the
and I'm really grateful for that. And as I say, I don't ever want to come to members. I don't like coming to members and say, yeah, you're going to have to bear with us because there's going to be delays. We try to avoid delays. That customer service and enabling people to access the service is crucial. But if people are saying, I'm really struggling, then there is an explanation behind it. And thank you for your support.
Same topic. I just wondered whether such professional staff are on the government's list to have immigration visas. And have we tried that route if it is? And if it isn't, have we tried lobbying to try and get planning staff on that list? Thanks.
Yeah, the challenge is, and actually we've used a number of agency staff. So that is another thing that we have used is agency staff, and we have used agency staff that have effectively got an overseas background. The challenge is, for good or for bad, the British planning system is unique, and it is not replicated anywhere else. So planners are a special breed in this country. You can take that whichever way you want. But it is a unique system. So it's not just in other countries, it'll often be architects that will do the planning function. So it's not something you can just directly replicate.
In that locality that judge, isn't it? Right. So Ken was next, then Stuart. Just one second. Was it on the same point or? Right, okay. If you hold on again, because just funnel it off, which I should do as a chair, if I can catch it. Go on, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ken. Yeah, this neutrality is, what the officer, and thank you very much. I saw him walk in, and I'm sure these door heads are getting lower. And he says it's threatened the whole growth agenda. And I just view that statement at best with interest. My understanding is that this neutrality catches all applications which haven't been completely approved. So if there's an application which is actually approved subject to conditions, then that application will be caught by this neutrality instruction. But I also understand that we can still give approvals subject to satisfying the neutrality. So developers do have the, shall we say, comfort of knowing that subject to them complying with neutrality, they will get consent. Is my understanding correct? And I don't think it should cause too much of a blockage because at the end of the day, in many cases, we're looking at housing people who need housing.
Don't quite know how you're going to. If you want to answer that, please do. But if not, because I know the point that you're probably going to say, which is in the report. So
Yeah, there's
we'll
a
close
danger.
out. Yeah.
If you bear with me, I'll be very quick.
Yeah.
The answer is your assumptions are somewhat flawed. They're correct in principle. Yes, you can condition, but there needs to be absolute certainty around that condition. You can't say you've got to come up with a scheme. The developer has to show that what that scheme is, that they have the land, that they have the technology, that they have the solution to strip out nutrients from their scheme. And at this point in time, no developer is able to demonstrate that. So we are facing a hiatus in planning permissions for the next few weeks or potentially months. Again, it's taking an inordinate amount of my time, inordinate amount of the team's time to try and find solutions. The South Coast, some of the South Coast authorities had a 2-year moratorium without planning permissions being issued. It is absolutely my commitment that we are not going to face that length of time. But it is a huge challenge, and it's not as simple as you've described, I'm afraid. Treading water, not necessarily dead.
Well, I'd never. I didn't mean personally. Okay. Right.
Some can stand on the bottom though.
But we are actually digressing from the point in the report by some margin at the moment. So if we just keep our eyes on where we are on the report and what's being said here, overview, scrutinise the purpose of this and the risk, etc. Does this help? That's the point really of the report, and that's what we need to scrutinise. So Ken Kelly has been waiting patiently, and then not Ken Kelly, Leggett will come second. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Phil. Nice to see you again. We've got a great risk, we've got a great risk because of this neutrality and the rest of it, which is not going to go away. Is there anything in the system or the council can do to increase the rates of what we actually pay senior officers to attract them? Has it been looked at? Have we looked at the budgets of maybe we have to pay out of the box there to attract these attention, because we're going to need these officers for years, especially with the neutrality? Could you answer that for me, please?
Yeah, I'm very happy if you want to add into the budget. Should we say agree between us 20% to all our salary? No.
More than you.
Yeah. Look, it is at the moment we're exploring all options, and there's I get slightly nervous about having sort of open, candid conversations around salaries in this sort of forum, but it is on our agenda. You know, there's options for golden hellos if we're employing people, golden handcuffs to keep people. You know, do we look for those areas of, you know, where we have critical officers that we can't lose because we then effectively erode the service we're providing? Yeah, is there some additionality to salaries? But you'll also appreciate that can cause a degree of ill feeling where those people are saying, well, I'm a critical service, I should be paying. I paid a bit more to those that actually perhaps we don't define as so critical. It's a really tricky issue. All I can say is everything's in the mix at this point in time.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the nutrients neutrality. I'm really very concerned here because is it the responsibility of the planning authority, the district council, waiting for the government's regulations and for how we make this assessment? Or is it entirely the government? We had a meeting with Chloe Smith just recently, and I tried to talk, and I felt she was really quite confused about what the situation is.
Yeah, again, I'm appreciating the chair's sort of direction on this, so I'll be very quick again if I can. It is our problem because the government, under the habitats regulations, we are the competent authority, and we cannot make a decision which exacerbates an adverse situation within protected areas. So the River Wensum and the Broads are protected. The levels of nutrients are in some cases 90% higher than they should be. We cannot make any decision as a competent authority which exacerbates that situation further. And any such decision would be unlawful.
So who makes that decision? Who makes this?
So that's set out in the habitats regulations that we are the competent authority. So the government in this particular instance and Natural England have only, in inverted commas, released more information about the nutrient levels in the Wensum and the Broads, saying it's too high. Then any decision which includes a new flushing toilet adds nutrients into an already adverse condition, and we are not allowed to make that decision unless we mitigate against it.
And we've got the source of where we get that information and make that assessment.
That evidence has come from Natural England, and unless we can counter that evidence or mitigate that evidence, then we can't make a decision.
That need to be able to do that to then come back through to planning, etc.
Yes and no. It's a multi-pronged. We cannot just say it's up to the developers, because if you're building one house, you can't mitigate against the level of nutrients that are coming out of that one house. You don't have the money, you don't have the facilities. So there will also be a public sector and angling water solution. Right. So it's three bodies: the water bodies, the angling water. It's the developers and it's us.
You're right. I had a moment. Right. If there's not any more on this or any other part of the report, probably wind this up. So, Sue, is there another point in the report?
It's about what we were talking about. Is there a different section on the agenda for that? The nutrient neutrality.
You can see the agenda in front of you, Sue. It's very clear what this agenda is. All the items are clearly indicated. You can clearly see that is not on the agenda anywhere else.
Okay, in that case, sorry, I've forgotten the question.
So I think we've kind of strayed off a bit, but I think that's useful oversight anyway to some degree, because there is some confusion around this. Anyway, but we do need to move on, come back to the report and the recommendations. Is there anything else on the report itself in the other section? No, okie dokie. So we've had just before I put recommendations, we've had the caveats from the officer in terms of the internet, which Sue raised. the original point about internet access. So with that caveat, I'm looking at the officer here. You're agreeing to actually firm that up for the cabinet. Is that correct?
Will do, Chairman.
Brilliant. Okie dokie. If we can minute that as well. And right, so the recommendations.
24.
24, Ken. Thank you.
Sorry.
Echo. No problem, thanks. Right, so I'm losing my paperwork now. So so the cabinet recommends to council 1, 2, 3. Do you want me to read 1, 2, 3 out, or can you all read? You can all read. Great. Okie. Okay. Do you want to take those in block then? Is there a mover for that?
I'll move this.
Seconded. Okay. All those in favour, please show.
I presume it includes the amendments the officers have acceded to.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. Wonderful. Thanks very much. And for the officers attending, I don't know if any of you are still staying, are you? I'm losing the plot here a bit. Yeah, brilliant. Okie dokie. Right, we'll move on to item 10, proposed capital investment in renewable energy. Page 37, Ken. And that's over to you, Phil. Do you want to relocate? Or do you want to stay there and Phil can do it where he is, I guess?
Doing what you've done, Chair, and I've lost the report.
Because he got distracted with picture.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. So this is a slightly strange report because in some ways it's a very simple matter. All that we're looking to do is put in to the capital programme £1 million. He still scrolls down and gets the report. Yeah, so we're looking to put £1 million in our reserves, set aside for renewable energy infrastructure. And the report tries to describe what that infrastructure is likely to be, but we're still in negotiations for that. And the reason why we need that in the capital programme is, firstly, it's something that's only happened in literally last week as an opportunity, as an investment opportunity. There's been a desire to have a green bond from certain key members that are saying we really want to try to look at a green bond that the local community can invest in green projects in this area. And in order to do that, we need that line in the capital programme, which will enable us to draw down that loan in due course. And because it was only negotiated or started negotiated on last week, it had missed Rodney's report in terms of the capital programme for next year. So it's a bespoke request, relatively straightforward. And if and when those projects or that project does come forward for approval, then that will be subject to a separate report to members.
Sorry, Peter. Is it you as well? Sure.
From existing reserves. So it'll literally be taking it from reserves and putting it into the capital programme.
Not earmarked reserves.
Not earmarked reserves.
but it will be earmarked if this goes through.
Yeah, so at the moment it's in the general reserves. If you allow Phil to have £1 million, that's up to you. It will then become earmarked for that purpose. Yeah.
And we'll be able to retain his services.
Raising salaries.
Exactly.
Unanimously.
Right. Stuart and then Yen.
Thank you, Chair.
Jen.
I would fancy being a bob in front of him, but anyway, I don't like unallocated reserves like this. I think, you know, it should be thought through, but I do appreciate that there is merit in what the report is saying. And I do actually notice that later on in the agenda, there's something in there can only happen if there's a reserve fund created here. So I would support it. So it's not totally unallocated, but it is actually allowing for a lot of aspiration here, and some of that aspiration does appear in later reports on this morning's agenda.
Absolutely. Just to re-emphasize that point, it's not just give us £1 million and we'll make something up. Yeah, there is an intended project for it. I can't be definitive about that until I come back with a legal agreement, which would be a loan agreement in due course. But that is absolutely the direction of travel. What it's also trying to indicate is, look, our ambition around green infrastructure, around green projects should be going up. That we should be raising the bar in what we want to achieve around that. And this is trying to set some money aside in order to achieve that.
And this additional to 750 last year that was.
The 750 is effectively a pot of money for a variety of projects. This is moving towards an investment opportunity, which would be £1 million investment opportunity as described in the report.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Certainly welcome the investment in renewable energy technologies and infrastructure. And so it's good to see this, but I also echo concerns about the fact that it's not too detailed at the moment. So just a couple of questions on details. So Food Enterprise Park Limited, it's just my ignorance. I'm not quite sure who Food Enterprise Park Limited are, and are they the landowners? And if you can explain.
Yeah, again, I'm very happy to pick up on this, but equally, I don't want to go into too much detail at this point in time because that will be subject to a separate report in due course. But yes, Food Enterprise Park, I mean, ultimately, the landowner in that area is in Alston, and they set up a company for the Food Enterprise Park. And so it is a separate company in order to deliver that facility.
And just another query is on, it appears to rely upon a response from the LEP to be able to come forward with the match funding. Is it entirely dependent on that, or is it the scale of the project that is reliant on that?
So again, in terms of, are we okay if we don't minute this? Because at the moment in time, these are still financial matters that are, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so okay. We're looking at infrastructure that will be in part funded by the LEP, and we will in part fund the LEP. I'd like to bring the business case back to members in due course, if that's all right.
Yeah, I don't want to, that's fine.
On that point, a second. So, sorry, you haven't finished. Sorry.
If it's on that point, because I was going to move on to
on that point, this pretty important point from this point of view is that you have got to come back again to ask Cabinet, and I'm actually going to just ask Judy, because portfolio holder, there's no way that you would be here without discussions with the portfolio holder. Judy, I know that, I know the way it works, and that's right and proper. So I will ask Judy if she wants to comment at all. but clearly you're going to have to come back again with the detail behind the project for us or cabinet. This is simply to earmark the funds for accounting purposes. So they're earmarked, they're not going to be used for anything else, subject to you coming back with a business case.
Absolutely. I hate to say it, I see this as a 3-step process.
Right.
The first is, are members happy to earmark reserves for this purpose? Because if they're not, end of. The second step is to come back with effectively a loan agreement where we can loan this £1 million to this project. The third is to then come back and say we want to raise a green bond, which will in effect substitute our own investment. And that will then free up that £1 million either to go back into general reserves or to use for another green project in a recyclable way. So I'm afraid you'll see me a little bit more, but at this point in time, it's just saying, are you happy to earmark these reserves in order to achieve those other purposes?
And the important thing is come back, we go through that detail. Without that, it'd be very difficult to make a decision, wouldn't it? It'd be wholly wrong as well. So Peter, I think he was in first, then Sue, then Ken.
Can you be clear, please, Phil? Are we looking at something which will be a loan to a certain organisation? Are we looking at an investment which will give us a return? Which is it, or is it a blend of the two?
Yeah, my apologies. I've used both. It would be a loan.
And what rate of interest?
I'm going to reserve that until I come back to you again.
But probably higher than you might have wanted, say, 6 weeks ago.
I think it's a reasonable rate of return.
As indicated, always like to invite the portfolio holder in a courtesy. And I know you would have been involved. So do you want to say anything before we carry on with the other questions?
I think this is an exciting possibility. It offers us something that we were certainly looking for, and it will enable our ambition to issue a green bond. But there's lots of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed as we get there. But the idea is quite exciting.
Okay. Right. So Sue and then Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm all for renewable technologies, but I'm really concerned about the ad hoc random nature of the location of solar farms across our beautiful land here in Norfolk. So I'm asking, is the land that this might be proposed to be put on already owned by the council? Is it something that would have to be procured? Obviously, planning would need to be granted, but the conversion of agricultural land at this point of time might not be a very sensible thing. So I've got lots of concerns about the land use and the location. Thanks.
No, that's fine. Again, I'm not trying to be evasive. I think that's still, in part, a case for you to consider in due course. But in reality, the main determining body for the solar farm will be the planning committee and the planning process. The other thing I'd say is this is not for investment alone, my apologies, in the solar park. It is the infrastructure that connects the solar park to the food enterprise park. And there's an important distinction there. So the solar park would have to go through the planning process. And if granted, there needs to be a connection between that solar park and the FEP. And it is the infrastructure in between the two that this would be funding, in part.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can I say, as Chairman of the Environmental Excellence Panel, this was discussed by party, and this was one of the recommendations of where we were looking to enhance our environmental issues with this. So as I say, it's something I heartily recommend, and we've already discussed it, at the panel, which Jan is a member and quite a few here. So like I say, I heartily recommend this report to go through, and I would like to propose it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'd echo what Ken's just said. Yeah, in terms of welcoming it. It's just a question, point of clarification, and it's partly to do with when we come to renewable energy projects and solar in particular. There have been issues around purchasing from China and the source of some of the equipment and technologies. And I first of all wanted to ask is if, and it's just my ignorance, have we got an ethical procurement policy? And if not, and would it then cover, this technology?
Again, I would suggest that. No, let me go back. I'd remind you, this is not loaning into the solar park and the solar panels itself. It's the infrastructure to connect the solar park to the FEP, to enable effectively the FEP to be operating on a significant proportion of solar, renewable energy. And so we're not procuring, we're not buying, we're not loaning or investing anything in the solar panels themselves.
No, I appreciate that. I guess it's the association with, projects that may have benefited from Uyghur slave labor producing solar panels, of which there are many in this country, and that are cheaper, obviously, and they're getting picked up. So I would like us to be clear about that as an issue for us to consider in avoiding getting into that kind of situation. That's all. Thank you.
I think all I can say is noted. I'll take that away.
Thank you, Chair. You're going to have to excuse my ignorance here, but if we are the planning authority that are either going to grant or not grant the planning application for the solar farm, but we're investing in that, how do we not have a conflict of interest?
Because the local planning authority is recognised as being separate. So in other words, for example, where Carrabrek was effectively something where this council, through Big Sky Limited, my apologies, that's a mistake, isn't it? Through Broadland Growth Limited, my apologies, I don't normally do that. So in Broadland Growth Limited, built Carrabrek, built the development at Plumstead, and this council received a direct financial contribution as a result of that. That was a council decision, but the local planning authority is recognised as separate and can make planning decisions separate to the council. It is absolutely commonplace throughout the entire country that those two things can work separately but in parallel.
And we've got lots of examples of it for county as well, haven't we? County's got a property, or it wants to do something with an I remember the RF culture, we wanted to dig up the runway at one point, but of course, the planning committee was considering that, wind turbines and all the rest of it. So it's quite common because you've got to abide by planning law, and you are drawn to that in terms of planning members, and that's where it's covered to. It's happened at time immemorial, so it's legal. Right, bit of overview, but I think we're there now, aren't we? Okie dokie. Right, so you proposed it, Jen seconded it, I think, didn't you? Oh, sorry, I thought you already did. Okie dokie. All those in favour? Anyone against? You're abstaining, okay. Sorry? All right. Right, thank you, Phil. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You can ninja back out again now. Yeah. Do people want a natural break for 5 minutes? I mean, a comfort break for 5-6 minutes? It's happening anyway. People are doing it with their feet anyway. 11, Ukraine update briefing report.
Page 41.
Over to you, Mike, page 41, Ken.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chairman. So just for an update, Jamie's on leave this week. So we're looking at, as you can see in the report, just really the live data that we're getting. So the role of the district council is to ensure the welfare and safety of the physical property and the sponsor. So our role as a district council, to focus on that, is that we do a housing standards check before the Ukrainian family have arrived, and we ensure things like the physical property, where that is in terms of spatial awareness, in terms of geographical location, etc. So we're ensuring that that house is up to the standard that we would expect for a UK resident. Once we've completed that check, we will then pass that on to the Home Office, who will then authorise that family to attend. And then what we'll do is we'll also do a welfare check when the family's in post. The reason we do a welfare check is to ensure that the physical family have turned up. We've got eyes on that family to make sure it's the same number who have suggested to come, and to make sure there's any immediate needs. Our role really is to support the sponsor family, because this scheme, as it says in the paper, this phase 1 element is it's a visa scheme. So this is a member of public in Broadland who wishes to offer their home to a Ukrainian family. It is their responsibility to identify that Ukrainian family. That's not anything to do with the council, and it's their responsibility and the Ukrainian family's responsibility to come over and to make those arrangements themselves. So the Home Office are issuing a visa. They're not issuing, as we did at the Afghans, where actually we provide the transport and we're actually finding accommodation for them. That's not this scheme, and I think that's quite important. That's certainly some of the misconceptions at the start. So what we're finding in terms of live, because I won't go through the report, but in terms of the live stuff, because we're on a call 3 times a week, is Broadland has had a fairly low take up, and we've got 17 sponsor families at the moment. That's in 17. That's increasing all the time. South Norfolk has been hit quite hard in terms of having over 50, but there's now 144 families across Norfolk. So they're gradually starting. The sponsor families are starting to come forward. They've had their housing checks completed. As of to date, we've only had 5 Ukrainian families actually turn up. So we're still in the early processes of understanding that, and we've had no families turn up in Broadland as yet. So we've approved the check, and then the visa is just working through. And practically, there's a range of issues there, which may well be. It just depends on when the family can travel from Ukraine, and when those arrangements with the sponsor family are being dealt with. So, but we will start fairly quickly now to ramp up having those families come over. So once we've got that in, they've got initial visa for 3 years, and the host family have to commit for up to 6 months. So as you'll see in the report, one of the risks potentially we've got is that that family breakdown, or that relationship with the sponsor breaks down. So if it does break down, because they're entitled to full benefits from as a UK citizen, so they would then come to the council to be housed. So it'll be our responsibility as a district council to house them. So we've got a vested interest in making sure that sponsor family really understands what it means to have a Ukrainian family live with you, and really understands what they will require, and whether this is for initial 6 months, because obviously after the 6 months they can say they've ended that host family, and then they've still got another 2.5 years to live in. So we've got to think about that. We've also got to think about issues around, inevitably it will happen around scamming. It happens about exploitation as well. So we're investigating one that's actually in South Norfolk at the moment, where a farm owner has requested 4 individuals. Now, we think that that's a perfectly legitimate, actually, call, but you have to check out that exploitation thing. So we're checking safeguarding stuff out as well. What we'll be doing is on that phase 1, and you can see in phase 2, which is potentially, and that's potentially a long way off, but whether organisations can become their own host organisations as well. I won't come on to that too much because we haven't got no information about that at the moment. Where we're really starting to focus is now we've got the housing checks done and we've kind of got a roll on with that, is looking at the opportunity of having families come over and they're all eligible to work. So can we ensure as a Norfolk system that we also support these individuals into employment? Because that's the absolute best thing if we can, because if we can get and normally it's mum, but if we can get people into employment, then they're more sustainable, and then they can then go into the private rented centre or potentially even buy their own home as well. So they're so if we can look at the employment sector, and in Norfolk we know that we've got a shortage of posts. So there's more posts than there are people to fill them. So if we can use this as a way to bring workforce into Broadland and Norfolk, then that's got to be a good thing as well. So that's where we are on a kind of live front. I'm happy to answer any questions there on the general update, because this was written a week and a half ago and it's already, it's a changing feast, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question about education, really. Have any of the schools, colleges, universities indicated that they are prepared to accept the refugees? And how would the sponsor families help the refugees into those places? Thank you.
So thank you. It's a good question. What they're doing is there's a separate work stream looking at education at the moment. There's been a strong willingness from schools to help support people in and families in. What they're looking for at the moment, and it's quite difficult at the moment because it's education, particularly because the vast majority are youngsters and particularly primary school age as well. So geographically, it's quite important that we understand, where that is. So looking at where those individuals or families are going to be placed, it's going to be a very practical exercise to look at the local primary school, which is obviously the best option. But is that primary school oversubscribed already? And all those really practical things. What they're shying away from, and this is still being worked through, is there's been suggestion about why don't you just bring all the Ukrainian families together? That makes sense in terms of financially, but that doesn't integrate people into the local area. So, there's some work to do about that. Certainly the colleges have been more than welcome there, and Norwich College, Eastern College have been really welcome in terms about actually can we support that. So I think that's been positive.
On page 45, in one of the issues here is resource, Mike, as you've already indicated. I know there's the scheme in terms of visiting the accommodations, obviously to make sure they're suitable, etc., safe and sound. But then on funding to support local councils, says 6.1, 10.5K. That is funding that would be provided to, how is that going to get distributed between local authorities? Is it part to the county, part to districts? I've actually sent an email in yesterday as a county councillor on this question. I've not got a response back yet.
Yep, Chairman. So we're having a constructive conversation with the 7 districts and county at the moment. So all that 10,500 comes into county council, and unusually there's a requirement to bring some of that down to the districts where there's a district, and the do like of Department of Levelling Up and Communities have specifically mentioned that, which is positive. But actually in Norfolk, it's been quite an open and frank conversation anyway. So what the aim will be is that it will all come into county council. We're looking at our costs at the moment, and as we stand, this is we're looking at an additional housing officer, additional community support officer. So that money will then come down into the 7 district councils separately. The rest of the money then will go into mainly education services and the People's Abroad team for, everything from, vaccination and support and just general health and social care type support.
Okay, so once you've sorted out those costs, you will have a call on the county for those. Are you getting any indications back from the county at the moment that that could be limited because of their priorities around costs provision from this pot?
There's, and I would say, I mean, the 10,500 is likely. It's difficult because we don't know the kind of families we're getting. If you're getting in families with a lot of social care needs, a lot of children who need additional support, then 10.5 grand isn't going to cut the mustard.
Yeah.
If you get families who are generally thriving, then 10.5 grand will. So we're at that point where we're just thank goodness that wasn't me. So at that point where we think we've got enough, and we're being constructive with the county, and all 7 districts are being constructive with the county to say, actually, at this moment in time, it looks like 10.5 grand is going to be sufficient to cover all needs. But once we start to get those families in and really start to see, then we'll know further. I mean, certainly what they're proposing, which is additional housing officer, additional community support officer, and funding for temporary accommodation, that would cover our needs at present. So we're quite comfortable for that. Early indication is that, yeah, they're fine. They're fine with the amount.
Important resource questions on this pool of money. So I'm waiting for some clarity back myself from the other side. Yeah, I should actually just have a declaration in the county because of this item, I guess. Jan and then Martin. All right. Martin.
Hello, Mike. I think we did discuss this about a fortnight ago at our meeting, but obviously we were looking around the initial people that are coming in. It's obviously the mums and the children and that. So looking at when we're doing the viability studies, making sure that there is sufficient for the men when they probably come back, because again, the 6 months to 3 years, when you look at what's happened out there, there's nothing. Lots of places have been destroyed. And I know I didn't mention before about the schooling, and we said, like, in the interim stages, where we've got the community places in towns and everything else like that, whether or not, and again, looking at the mums that are coming over, some of them may be teachers, and providing the initial primary care from there, and whether that could be an option.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. And that's absolutely right. One of the key, we're starting again with only 5 families is too early to say. What we're seeing is we are seeing cohorts of people likely to come over with skills. And I think, this initial thing that, this will be a massive drain on the resources. Actually, we've got untapped potential of people who can come in. Now, so certainly, teaching, health and social care, which we know we're really short of. So obviously, and the benefit is they all speak Ukrainian. So can we tap into that? And I think certainly the thinking around Norfolk at the moment is how do we use this cohort of people when they come over to support themselves, because there'll be a good support network. And so one of the things we are looking to do, which I didn't particularly mention, but looking at kind of networking. So we're using libraries where they can come in once a week and network, and we're looking at potentially Aylsham Library. It depends on where the numbers come in and where they come into, but a chance for them to physically meet each other, to chat around how that network and support can go, and that employment advice. If we know we've got teachers or health and social care, can we tap them into the system really early? So yeah, that's certainly in our thinking.
And also, I know it was mentioned in our meeting, but Kerry said that we'd actually got 2 Ukrainian-speaking employees now. Just for members, just so they're
that's
aware.
fine for members. It's a good call. It's a good job. So we've actually employed on through the CSA money, the COVID support advisor money that we've already got. We've employed 2 contracts, so 2 fluent Ukrainian speakers, so who are going to help us out. So that's really good. These are people who live and work in the area. One's an interpreter, works very closely with the legal team and the police anyway. And they've come on board and work with us. So that's been a real asset for us to ensure, particularly around the safeguarding. I don't want to dwell on too much because we're working on the principle of 80-20. 80% will come over perfectly good, true meaning sponsors and Ukrainian families. There will inevitably be issues. So ensuring that we've got people who can speak Ukrainian to ensure that those families, when they come over, have got a avenue to talk if there are concerns.
And there are certain areas in Ukraine where the primary language is Russian. Mike, can I just ask a really important question? And now this is a little bit of a sore point because we've had habitual issues with this over the years. You've mentioned Aylsham in terms of perhaps also somewhere there for people to go. You must please inform the district councillors within the ward of any events that are going on, because within those communities, there will be issues. For instance, if there are events going on, if there is some location, we need to be fully aware of that to be able to support it and tackle issues that evolve from it. And as you know, we had issues down in Bardersfield, and I, for one, was up to here, as you remember. So I don't think it's going to be exactly the same, but please always keep us really informed, the local ward members, of detail as any progression or any other ward, if there happens to be some centre or something.
It's a good point, Chairman. I'll make sure that there's no firm details yet, but as soon as I know, we'll make sure local members are informed.
Thank you. Right, so Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say from my parents, they took in bombed out people from the Second World War, and the accommodation, can I say, was less than ideal. There was a bed put on the landing as an example, and half the bed actually faced the open stairs, and it wasn't unknown for this occupant of that bed to slide down the stairs. So I'm pleased that standards are actually maintained. I am actually a little bit surprised how, I'm actually on a WhatsApp site and there's loads of stuff going around there. Why can't I get a refugee, basically? And that there's only 5 people arrived in the Broadland area. I find that quite difficult to think that that is all we're volunteers are up for. And I would just like to ask the officer through the chair, what is the hold up? Is it structural? Is it the lack of will? Why aren't we getting more?
It's a good question, Councillor Beadle, and I mean I don't know why Broadland residents haven't come forward as much as for example South Norfolk. So say we've had 50 families, sponsor families come forward in South Norfolk and only 15 in Broadland. Why that is? Because they're similar populations, similar size, similar geographic, etc. So I really don't know. What we've done is a part of a county council session is we run 2 Zoom calls asking for people who are interested in becoming a host family, a sponsor family, to come forward and we can answer your questions. We've gone out there, we've promoted it, it's all on our website. So why we haven't in Broadland got as many residents come forward, I don't know. One of the issues, certainly because there was on the initial call when the government put out, there was 150,000 residents nationally put forward to become a host and sponsor family. That's dwindled significantly as people realised that they had to go and find their own family. So whether or not that's put people off, we're still working through, but the numbers are very low at the moment to really identify what it is. And the families in Broadland who have come forward, there doesn't seem to be any pattern. I mean, it's 15, you can't do a pattern, but they tend to be empty nesters. So they tend to be older people who children have flown the nest, so they've got a spare room. That seems to be the only pattern, but why they've come forward and not others, I don't know.
the overall percentage of households in Britain are quite low, really. 1,500 is tiny, less than 0%. Jan?
Yeah, just clarification on the figures then, because the figures like you're talking about is Homes for Ukraine scheme, is that right? Yeah, so that doesn't include the Ukraine family scheme, which is, so, I mean, we've come across a situation where, and there's been a bit of confusion over this, so it was a local resident wrote to me, wanted clarification, and again, the Help Hub, Jamie in particular, helped out on that, so that was very good. But the point is that it was somebody who came through a relative, but isn't staying with that relative, but is being put up by somebody who has the spare room. So I don't know how many situations there are of that kind, but in addition to the Homes for Ukraine scheme, there will also be people who are being put up through the Ukraine family scheme as well. Is that correct?
That's right, Councillor Davis. And there is some confusion out there, partly because they sound the same. But I mean, the Ukraine family scheme has been going for a number of years anyway. It's a very similar scheme to lots nationally. Whereas if you have a close family member or friend, you can invite them over and on a visa. That's a completely separate to what we're talking about here. That's working on the assumption that that family member wants to come over and work on that, and they have a visa for similar 3 years. What that doesn't do is that 10,500 per person doesn't follow, because it's assumed that Ukrainian family have invited that family member for a reason, and they will provide all their food, lodgings and support. So so where possible, if people are confused, we will always try and push for the Homes for Ukraine, because then the funding follows.
Thank you, Chair. I've been following the process very closely, and first of all, I'd be interested to know, I don't know if we can find out, how many residents of Broadland did register for the Homes for Ukraine scheme, because I suspect it's an awful lot more than 17. And the difficulties that we're hearing in the news about the process of application for a visa, as well as the time it takes once your applications in to actually get them over here and are permitted to travel, I think is a demotivator in itself. Is there anything that we as a council can do to help? I've heard of families supporting their potential refugee visitors over on in the EU by paying for rooms, paying for hotels, and supporting them over there. But obviously, the longer the visa application takes, the less possible it is to maintain that situation. So is there a sort of red line here of what the council's prepared to get in or able to get involved with, or is there anything more that we can do to try and encourage the people who originally registered for the Homes for Ukraine scheme to actually follow it through?
What we've, we asked for the data originally, and we were told we'd get it, and we never did get it. So I'd imagine it got lost in the Home Office somewhere, the initial 150,000. In terms of the lines of what we can and can't do, we've been promoting it. We've been encouraging people. We've run these sessions. If you want to know more about it, whether there's any practically we can do, it's very limiting, because ultimately they have to. It's a visa application which has to be entirely done by the Home Office, and all we can do is when we get families in, or host families, that we aim to complete those checks as quick as possible to ensure that's working in. Whether or not there's anything more we can do, I can't think of anything at the moment without stepping on the toes of the Home Office, and they're a big beast compared to us. So,
just for instance, I've heard of Ukrainian speakers being involved in the Zoom call where the sponsor family are trying to work with the potential refugees to to go through the visa process. Is that something that this council could offer?
Some sort of mediation type, or not mediation, but yeah, some intermediary work. I mean, it's something we could potentially look at. I mean, there's certainly there are host organisations and organisations that do that work already. So certainly in Ukraine. So yeah, so we'd have to. I mean, I can do some digging about this because I know that the application process has been held up, and it's slow, and it's slower than the UK government wants it to be. So they're looking at ways that they can try and speed up. So I'll do some more digging about what's going on, because I don't want to duplicate anything nationally that goes on. But yeah, I can do some more digging on that.
Okie dokie. So I think we're about there, really. So we've got the recommendation here.
Page 46, Ken.
Yes, 46, Ken. We say it twice, Ken, and hopefully, you know, it sort of gets picked up. We'll keep on doing it, Martin. So point one, to acknowledge the arrangements put in place, which we do. And two, to agree Director of People and Communities, in consultation with Portfolio of Housing Wellbeing, to utilise any devolved funding, which we've actually covered that point in terms of 10,500. Still developing in terms of that as well. So I suppose second, agreed. Yeah. Anyone against? No, okay. Thank you. Thanks for the update. Agenda item 12, page 47.
Page 47.
Page 47. And it's used so far away. But I mean, this really should be a pretty quick response on this one. We should be able to pull forward again or back again a bit. So far away, Sue.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll try and speak quickly. So before you at page 47 of the Cabinet Papers is the draft Joint Public Sector Equality Duty Annual Report for 21-22. As you're probably aware, as a public body, we have a statutory requirement to report annually on how we've complied with our obligations under the Public Sector Equality Duty, as is required by the Equality Act 2010. We're also required to publish this annual report on our public website. This annual report is at Appendix A and starts on page 51 of the agenda papers. On page 52, you'll find a list of the 9 characteristics which are protected under the Equality Act. You will also see that in exercising our functions, we're required to have due regard to 3 specific areas, both for our service users and our staff. I'll just very briefly summarise what these 3 obligations entail. Number 1 is to eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment and victimisation and other conduct prohibited by the Act. So in addition to the more obvious work undertaken by... Ooh, sorry, that's not good, is it? I think it stopped. I'll step back a bit. Okay, can you still hear me?
Laptop, just push it away a minute, Sue.
Push it away.
It's the magnetic mic in that.
Might be, yeah. Okie doke. Is that better? Okay. Right. So, so eliminating discrimination. So, in addition to the more obvious work that Mike does with the Help Hub when they deal with vulnerable people who've fallen victim to harassment and discrimination, this section also requires the council to pay due regard to equality issues when forming policies, and in its processes to ensure we're not discriminating against anyone with a protected characteristic. Number 2, to advance equality of opportunity between hold on, let me start with you. It's probably me. Okay. So number 2, to advance equality of opportunity between people who share a protected characteristic and people who don't. Many people think that advancing equality is about treating everyone the same way. This is not the case. Advancing equality is about removing or reducing disadvantages suffered by people due to their protected characteristics. So sometimes this means that we need to treat these individuals more favourably than others to bring them up to the same level of opportunity as everyone else. 3 is to foster good relations between people who share a protected characteristic and those who don't. This can be done through a variety of ways, for example, through our community connectors, introducing people to local groups where they can make friends and get help. It could be our officers and members helping to set up community groups. And it also includes raising awareness and providing positive messaging around subjects such as mental illness, accessibility, and promoting events such as World Menopause Day and Norwich Pride. You'll see in the report I've explored each of these 3 sections in turn. Firstly, providing evidence of how they've been met for our residents, and secondly, how they've been met for our staff, and that's our requirement under the Act. But as a local authority, we don't just want to tick boxes to comply with legislation, because we do most of these things anyway in our daily work. So I've attempted to bring the report to life by providing actual examples of where we've done some really good work and made a huge difference to people's lives. So going back to page 49, my recommendation to Cabinet will be that they approve the annual report.
Thank you, Sue. Unless there's anyone else, I'm going to move to recommendation. Okay. As attached to Appendix A, yeah, which has been recommended to Cabinet. So all agreed? Agreed, yes. No one against, don't think. Thank you very much, Sue. I had some. I'll flip now.
13 for plan.
It was 13. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's exclusion. Exclusion. Yeah. Item 14, exclusion of the press and public. I move that press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business, because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006, would be disclosed to them. I so move.